construction crew arrived at a house in Youghal, County Cork in 2023 to begin renovation work. Routine job, routine house, until one of the workers broke through the concrete floor and found something that had been buried there for 6 years. Tina Satchwell was 49 years old. She had lived in Youghal her whole life. She was known as warm, quiet, devoted. She and her husband Richard had been together for decades. To everyone who knew her, she was simply Tina, a woman who had never hurt anyone. In March 2017, Tina Satchwell disappeared. Her husband Richard told Gardaí, the Irish police, that the couple had argued and that Tina had packed a bag and walked out the front door. He said he had no idea where she went. He said he was devastated. What happened next was something investigators would later call one of the most calculated acts of deception they had ever seen. Richard Satchwell did not grieve quietly. He went on television. He gave interview after interview to Irish media. He cried. He pleaded. He performed. He organized candlelight vigils in Youghal. He stood at the front of the crowd holding a candle, head bowed. Local people gathered around him. They believed him. They comforted him. They helped him search for a woman who was already gone. Tina's family waited. Her friends waited. Every year that passed without answers was another year of unresolved grief. Missing persons cases are uniquely cruel. You cannot mourn someone properly when you don't know if they are alive or dead. Tina's family lived in that suspension for 6 years. The Gardaí investigated. They followed leads. They appealed for information. But without a body, without evidence of foul play, and with a husband who was publicly performing his grief, the case stalled. Richard Satchwell remained above suspicion. He remained the grieving husband. In 2023, 6 years after Tina vanished, builders arrived at the Satchwell home to begin renovation work. Richard had moved on. The house was being updated. The workers began breaking through the ground floor. And somewhere beneath the concrete, Tina Satchwell had been there the entire time. When the workers broke through the floor, they found human remains. The Gardaí were called immediately. Forensic teams arrived. The house became a crime scene. And Richard Satchwell, who had spent 6 years crying on television, was now the prime suspect in the murder of his own wife. Forensic examination of Tina's remains revealed injuries consistent with a violent death. She had not simply fallen. She had not died accidentally. The woman who Richard had wept for on national television had been killed, and then buried beneath the floor of her own home. Richard Satchwell was arrested. The man who had stood at vigils. The man who had looked into television cameras and spoken his wife's name with tears in his eyes. The man the whole town of Youghal had comforted, was taken into custody for her murder. At trial, Richard Satchwell claimed Tina's death was an accident. He said the couple had argued. He said she fell. He said he panicked. He said he did not know what to do, so he buried her. The prosecution asked one question in response. If it was an accident, why did you spend 6 years on television lying? During the trial, prosecutors played Richard's own television interviews back to the jury. His tears, his pleas, his performances. The jury watched a man cry for his missing wife, knowing that when those interviews were filmed, she was already beneath his floor. The silence in the courtroom was described as absolute. Here is what the trial could not fully answer. The Satchwell home is a small terraced house on a residential street in Youghal. Neighbors on both sides. A community that knew them. How does a man bury his wife beneath his own floor, in a house with walls thin enough to hear everything, and not be caught for 6 years? Criminologists who studied the case described Richard Satchwell as a textbook example of a specific profile, a killer who uses public grieving as a shield. The more sympathy he generated, the less scrutiny he faced. Every tear on camera was protection. Every vigil was armor. He had turned the community's compassion into cover. Tina's family issued a statement after the verdict. They said they had always known. They said they had tried to tell people. They said they had watched Richard perform his grief and felt something was deeply wrong. But without evidence, no one listened. For 6 years, they had been right and unheard. In 2024, Richard Satchwell was convicted of murdering Tina Satchwell. He was sentenced to life in prison. The judge described his behavior as a sustained and calculated act of deception that caused immeasurable suffering to those who loved Tina. He was taken from the courtroom. The vigils were finally over. Youghal is a small town. Everyone knew someone who had stood at one of Richard's vigils. Everyone knew someone who had believed him. The verdict forced a community to reckon with something deeply uncomfortable. That grief can be weaponized. That compassion can be exploited. That the person performing the most pain can be the one who caused it. Tina Satchwell was 49 years old when she died. She loved her home, her family, in the town she had grown up in. She deserved to grow old in it. She deserved to be found sooner. She deserved, at the very minimum, not to have her death turned into a 6-year performance by the man who caused it. Richard Satchwell is now serving a life sentence. Tina is finally at rest. But the question that case leaves behind, the one that stays with you, is not how he did it. It's how we believed him. If this case stayed with you, subscribe. Next week, we go somewhere just as dark,